The morning sun cast long shadows across the stone corridors of Windsor Castle as Prince William walked briskly toward his private study. His footsteps echoed softly on the ancient floors, a sound that had become as familiar to him as his own heartbeat. Today felt different somehow, though he couldn't quite place why. There was an unusual heaviness in the air, like the calm before a storm. Kate had left early that morning for a charity event in London, her smile bright, but her eyes holding a hint of concern. She had kissed him goodbye at the door, her hand lingering on his arm just a moment longer than usual. "Take care of yourself today," she had whispered, and he had promised he would, not knowing how much that promise would soon mean. As William approached his study, he noticed something unusual. The heavy oak door, which he always kept locked when away, stood slightly ajar. His security detail would never allow such a breach of protocol. His heart began to race as he considered the possibilities. Had someone broken in? Was there a security threat he hadn't been informed about? He paused outside the door, listening carefully. There was no sound from within, but something felt wrong. The air seemed thick with an emotion he couldn't identify. Taking a deep breath, William slowly pushed the door open wider and stepped inside. What he saw made his blood run cold. The room, usually pristine and organized, was in complete disarray. Papers were scattered across the floor like fallen leaves. His grandfather's antique desk, passed down through generations, had been overturned. Books that had belonged to his grandmother lay torn and damaged across the Persian rug. But it wasn't the destruction that made William's knees weak. It was the photographs, hundreds of them, scattered everywhere. Pictures of his mother, Princess Diana, that he had never seen before. Images from her final years that showed her pain, her struggle, her desperate attempts to find peace in a world that never gave her privacy. Among the chaos, one photograph caught his eye. It was different from the others, more personal, more intimate. It showed Diana in what appeared to be a hospital room, her face gaunt and tired, but her eyes still holding that spark of love that William remembered so well. She was holding something in her hands, something that made William's heart stop. It was a letter, addressed to him in her familiar handwriting. The photograph was clear enough that he could make out the first few words. "My dearest William, if you are reading this, then the truth has finally come to light." William sank into the only chair that remained upright, his hands shaking as he picked up photograph after photograph. Each one told a story he had never heard, revealed secrets that had been buried for over 2 decades. There were pictures of his mother meeting with people he didn't recognize, documents with official seals, and medical records that made no sense to him. As he continued to examine the evidence spread before him, William began to understand that this wasn't random vandalism or a simple break-in. Someone had carefully placed these items here, someone who wanted him to find them. Someone who knew things about his mother's death that had never been made public. His phone rang, startling him from his thoughts. It was Kate's name on the screen, but when he answered, he heard an unfamiliar voice. "Prince William," the voice said, calm and deliberate. "I assume you found what I left for you." "Who is this?" William demanded, his voice stronger than he felt. "What do you want?" "I want the truth to come out," the voice replied. "Just as your mother did. She spent her final months trying to expose what really happened, trying to protect you and Harry from the same fate. Now it's time for you to finish what she started." "What are you talking about?" William asked, though deep down, he was beginning to understand that his world was about to change forever. "Look at the photograph in your left hand," the voice instructed. "The one with the letter. Your mother didn't die in an accident, William. She was silenced because she got too close to the truth about something much bigger than the royal family. Something that reaches into the highest levels of government and threatens the very foundation of the monarchy." William looked down at the photograph he was holding. His mother's face stared back at him, and, for the first time, he noticed something else in the image. In the background, partially hidden by shadows, was a figure he recognized. Someone who had been at Diana's funeral, someone who had comforted the family in their grief, someone they had trusted completely. "The person you see in that photograph," the voice continued, as if reading his thoughts, "is the same person who has been watching you and Kate for years, making sure you never got too close to the truth. But your mother was smarter than they gave her credit for. She left a trail of evidence, hidden it in places they would never think to look." William's mind raced as he tried to process what he was hearing. Could it be true? Had his mother's death really been something more sinister than the tragic accident they had all believed it to be? "Why are you telling me this now?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Because Kate is in danger," the voice replied, and William felt his world tilt on its axis. She's been asking questions, following leads that your mother left behind. They know she's getting close to something they've worked very hard to keep buried. The charity event she went to today? It's not what she thinks it is. William shot to his feet, the photographs scattering around him like a deck of cards in a windstorm. What do you mean? Where's Kate? Is she safe? For now, the voice said. But only if you do exactly what I tell you. There's a safe hidden behind the portrait of King George in your study. Inside, you'll find documents that your mother gathered over months of careful investigation. Study them carefully, learn the truth, and then decide how far you're willing to go to protect your wife and children from the same fate that befell your mother. The line went dead, leaving William alone with the scattered evidence of a conspiracy he was only beginning to understand. His hands trembling, he walked to the portrait of King George that had hung in his study for years. He had looked at it thousands of times, but had never noticed the subtle differences in the wall behind it. Pressing along the edges of the frame, he felt a small section give way. The portrait swung open like a door, revealing a hidden safe that had been there all along, waiting for this moment. The combination lock stared back at him, but somehow, he knew the numbers. His mother's birthday, reversed. As the safe clicked open, William saw that it contained exactly what the mysterious caller had promised. Folders filled with documents, photographs, and recordings. Evidence of corruption, cover-ups, and conspiracies that went to the very heart of the British establishment. But as he reached for the first folder, his phone rang again. This time it was Kate's number, and this time it was her voice. "William," she said, and he could hear the fear in her tone. "Something's wrong. This event, these people, they're not who they say they are. I think I'm in trouble." "Kate, listen to me carefully," William said, his training as a future king taking over despite his fear. "Where are you exactly? Can you get out of there safely?" "I don't know," Kate replied, her voice breaking. "They've been asking me questions about Diana, about things I shouldn't know. William, I think they know that I've been looking into your mother's death." The line crackled with static, and William could hear voices in the background, voices that didn't sound friendly. "Kate, are you still there?" he called out. But the line had gone dead. William stared at the phone in his hand, then at the evidence spread around his study, and finally at the hidden safe that had revealed secrets his family had kept for decades. The morning that had started with a simple kiss goodbye had become the beginning of a nightmare that threatened everything he held dear. As he stood alone in the chaos of his study, surrounded by the truth about his mother's final days, William realized that his life as he knew it was over. The question now wasn't whether he could uncover the conspiracy that had taken his mother's life. The question was whether he could save Kate before history repeated itself. He picked up the first folder from the safe, his mother's handwriting clear on the tab. "For William, when you're ready for the truth." As he opened it, the first document made his blood run cold. It was a medical report dated just days before his mother's death, indicating that she had been pregnant again. Pregnant with a child that could have changed the line of succession forever. A child that certain people would have done anything to prevent from being born. William sank back into his chair, the weight of 25 years of lies and cover-ups crushing down on him. His mother hadn't just been running from the paparazzi that night in Paris. She had been running for her life, trying to protect a secret that powerful people were willing to kill for. And now Kate was walking into the same trap that William's hands shook as he dialed the number for his personal protection officer. But the call went straight to voicemail. That had never happened before. His security team was always available, always just a phone call away. The silence on the other end of the line felt like a death sentence. He tried calling Kate again, but her phone was no longer in service. The automated message echoed in his ear like a mockery of his worst fears. His wife, the mother of his children, had vanished into thin air, and he was completely powerless to help her. The documents from his mother's hidden safe lay scattered across his desk, each one revealing another layer of the conspiracy that had cost Diana her life. Medical records showed she had been under surveillance by people claiming to be doctors. Phone records revealed conversations with journalists who had mysteriously died in accidents shortly after speaking with her. Financial documents showed money changing hands in ways that made no sense unless you understood that someone was being paid to look the other way. But it was the final document in the folder that made William's world collapse entirely. It was a birth certificate dated 6 months after his mother's supposed death. A child born to Diana Spencer, father unknown, adopted immediately by a family whose name had been blacked out by official censors. His mother hadn't just been pregnant when she died. She had somehow survived long enough to give birth. which meant everything they had been told about the Paris accident was a lie. William's phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. Kensington Palace Library. 3rd floor. Come alone. Your wife's life depends on it. Without hesitation, William grabbed his mother's documents and headed for the door. He couldn't trust his security team, couldn't call the police, couldn't even reach out to his brother Harry without potentially putting more lives at risk. For the first time in his life, the future King of England was completely on his own. The drive to Kensington Palace felt like a journey through a nightmare. Every familiar street looked different. Every face in the crowd seemed threatening. William found himself checking his rearview mirror constantly, expecting to see cars following him, but the roads appeared empty. That somehow made it worse. Kensington Palace had been his mother's home, the place where he and Harry had spent countless happy hours in their childhood. Now it felt like a mausoleum, filled with ghosts and secrets that had been hidden for far too long. The security guards at the gate waved him through without question, their faces carefully neutral in a way that made him wonder if they knew more than they were letting on. The library on the 3rd floor had been closed to the public for renovations for months. As William climbed the stairs, each step echoing in the empty corridors, he wondered if this had all been planned. Had someone been preparing this meeting place for weeks, knowing that eventually he would discover the truth about his mother? The library door was slightly open, just like his study had been that morning. William pushed it open carefully, half expecting to find another room full of scattered photographs and hidden truths. Instead, he found Kate. She was sitting in a chair by the window, her back to the door, perfectly still. For a terrifying moment, William thought the worst had happened. But, as he called her name, she turned around, and he could see that she was alive, though clearly shaken. "William," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Thank God you're here. But you shouldn't have come alone. Are you hurt?" he asked, rushing to her side and checking her for injuries. She appeared to be unharmed, but her eyes held a haunted look that he had never seen before. "I'm fine," she said. "But, William, the things I've learned today, the people I've met, it changes everything. Everything we thought we knew about your family, about the monarchy, about your mother's death." "I know," William said, showing her the documents from Diana's safe. "I found evidence too. Kate, my mother didn't die in that car crash. She survived long enough to have another child." Kate's face went pale. "That's impossible. We would have known. The whole world was watching." "That's exactly what they wanted everyone to believe," said a voice from the shadows behind the bookshelves. An elderly woman emerged, someone William didn't recognize but who seemed familiar in a way he couldn't place. "Who are you?" William demanded, instinctively moving to protect Kate. "My name is Margaret Thornton," the woman said, her voice calm but filled with sadness. "I was your mother's midwife. I delivered her final child 6 months after the world thought she had died." William felt the room spinning around him. "That's impossible. My mother died in Paris. I was at her funeral." "You were at a funeral," Margaret corrected gently. "But it wasn't your mother in that coffin. Diana was badly injured in the crash, yes, but she survived. She was taken to a private hospital, hidden away while the world mourned her death. She lived for 6 more months, long enough to give birth to the child that certain people wanted to ensure never existed." Kate reached for William's hand, squeezing it tightly. "William, the charity event I went to today, it was all a setup. They wanted to see what I knew, how much I had discovered about Diana's investigations. The people running it, they're connected to the same conspiracy that your mother was trying to expose." "What conspiracy?" William asked, though he was beginning to piece together the truth from the documents he had found. Margaret sat down heavily in one of the library chairs, looking every one of her 70-plus years. "Your mother discovered that members of Parliament, along with certain royal advisors, had been selling state secrets to foreign governments for decades. Not just small secrets, but information that put national security at risk. When Diana threatened to expose them, they decided she had to be silenced." "But why fake her death?" Kate asked. Why not make sure she died in the crash?" "Because Diana was smarter than they gave her credit for," Margaret replied. "She had hidden evidence all over London, with instructions that if anything happened to her, the truth would come out. They needed time to find and destroy that evidence before they could finish what they started." William's mind raced as he tried to process what he was hearing. "You're saying my mother spent 6 months hiding, giving birth, while these people searched for her evidence?" "That's exactly what I'm saying," Margaret confirmed. "And during those 6 months, she continued her investigation. She gathered even more proof, more names, more documentation of the corruption that went all the way to the top of the government. But she also knew she was running out of time. What happened to the baby? Kate asked softly. Margaret's eyes filled with tears. Diana made me promise to keep the child safe, to raise them away from all of this. She said the baby was the future, the hope for a better royal family. Someone who could one day help clean up the corruption that had infected the monarchy for generations. Where is this child now? William demanded. Are they safe? They're an adult now, Margaret said. 24 years old, living a normal life, completely unaware of who they really are. Diana thought it was better that way. Safer. William stood up abruptly, pacing to the window that overlooked the palace gardens where he had played as a child. Everything he thought he knew about his family, his mother, his own life, had been built on lies. But there was something else, something that made his stomach clench with fear. If these people killed my mother to protect their secrets, he said slowly, and they know that Kate has been investigating, then they're not going to let either of you walk away from this, Margaret finished grimly. Diana thought she could expose them and survive. She was wrong. You need to be smarter than she was. Kate stood up and joined William at the window. There's something else, she said quietly. At the charity event today, before everything went wrong, I overheard a conversation. They were talking about you, William. About how much you know, about whether you're a threat like your mother was. What did they say? They said that if you proved to be a problem, they could arrange another accident. Something that would look natural, unavoidable. They mentioned your children, William. They know that threatening George, Charlotte, and Louis is the fastest way to control you. The blood drained from William's face. His children, innocent and unaware of the danger that surrounded them, were now pawns in a game that had been going on since before they were born. We have to get them somewhere safe, he said, reaching for his phone to call their nanny. William, wait, Margaret said urgently. Your phones, your security detail, your entire household staff, they've all been compromised. The people you trust, some of them have been working for the conspiracy for years. If you make any calls, if you go through normal channels, you'll be walking right into their hands. Then, what do we do? Kate asked, her voice breaking. How do we protect our children if we can't trust anyone? Margaret reached into her handbag and pulled out an old mobile phone, the kind that had been popular 20 years earlier. Your mother gave me this before she died. She said that one day, her sons would need it. It's connected to a network that the conspiracy doesn't know about, people who were loyal to Diana and who have been waiting for this day. William took the phone with trembling hands. It felt ancient and fragile, but somehow also like a lifeline. Who are these people? Former MI5 agents who discovered the corruption and tried to stop it. Journalists who were threatened into silence, but never gave up looking for the truth. Palace staff who saw what was happening and chose to protect your mother instead of their careers. They've been waiting 24 years for the right moment to act. And that moment is now. It has to be, Margaret said. Because Kate's investigation has forced their hand. They're going to move against you soon, probably within the next few hours. But this time, we're ready for them. Kate looked at the ancient phone in William's hands, then at Margaret's determined face. What exactly are you asking us to do? I'm asking you to trust the people your mother trusted, Margaret replied. I'm asking you to finish what Diana started. And I'm asking you to save not just yourselves and your children, but the entire royal family from the corruption that has been eating it alive for decades. William looked out at the gardens where his mother had once pushed him on the swings, where she had taught him to be kind, to be brave, to always fight for what was right. He thought about his children, sleeping safely in their beds, unaware that their entire world was built on secrets and lies. Tell me what to do, he said finally, his voice steady with resolve. Margaret smiled for the first time since they had met. First, we get your children to safety. Then, we expose the truth about your mother's death. And then, we bring down the conspiracy that has controlled the royal family for far too long. As if summoned by her words, the old phone in William's hands began to ring. The phone's shrill ring cut through the library like a blade. William answered it with shaking hands, not knowing what to expect. Your Royal Highness, came a voice he didn't recognize, calm and professional. My name is James Fletcher. I worked with your mother during her final months. Margaret will have told you about us. Are you ready to move? Move where? William asked, looking at Kate and Margaret for guidance. Your children are no longer at Adelaide Cottage, Fletcher said, and William's heart stopped. Don't panic. They're safe. We moved them 20 minutes ago, along with their nanny Maria. They think they're going on a special adventure to a safe house in Scotland. But we had to act fast. There were 3 cars heading toward your home, and they weren't from your security detail. Kate grabbed William's arm, her face white with terror. Our babies, she whispered. They're completely safe, Fletcher assured them, somehow hearing her whispered words. But you need to leave Kensington Palace immediately. There are people coming for you, and they're not interested in taking prisoners this time. Margaret stood up quickly, moving with surprising speed for a woman her age. There's a service tunnel that runs from this library to the street outside. Diana used it sometimes when she needed to leave without being seen. We need to go now. As they gathered the documents and prepared to leave, William heard something that made his blood run cold. Footsteps in the corridor outside, heavy and deliberate. Multiple sets of them, moving with military precision. They're here, Kate breathed, recognizing the same sound. Margaret moved to a bookshelf on the far wall, pulling certain books in a specific sequence. With a soft click, the entire shelf swung inward, revealing a narrow passage that disappeared into darkness. Your mother had this installed in 1995, Margaret whispered as they hurried into the tunnel. She said she had a feeling she might need it someday. The passage was cramped and smelled of damp stone, but it felt like salvation. Behind them, they could hear the library door being forced open, followed by angry voices when the intruders found the room empty. Search everywhere, came a command in an accent William couldn't place. They can't have gone far. The tunnel seemed to go on forever, but, finally, they emerged through a hidden entrance in the basement of a building across the street from the palace. Fletcher was waiting for them with a nondescript van, and 3 other people William didn't recognize. These are the friends your mother trusted, Fletcher explained quickly as they climbed into the van. We've been preparing for this day for 24 years. As they drove through London's winding streets, taking a route that seemed designed to confuse anyone trying to follow them, Fletcher began to explain what they had discovered. The conspiracy your mother uncovered goes deeper than any of us originally thought, he said. It's not just about selling state secrets. These people have been manipulating the line of succession for decades, ensuring that only royals they can control ever come to the throne. What do you mean? William asked, though he was beginning to suspect he knew. Your great-uncle Edward's abdication wasn't really about marrying a divorced woman, Fletcher explained. He had discovered evidence of the conspiracy and threatened to expose it. They forced him to give up the throne to protect their secrets. Kate reached for William's hand. And your mother? Diana wasn't just investigating corruption in Parliament, Fletcher continued. She had discovered that certain members of the royal family itself were involved. People very close to the throne who had been compromised for years. The van pulled into what appeared to be an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of London. But, as they entered, William realized it was anything but abandoned. The space had been converted into a high-tech command center, with computers, communication equipment, and walls covered with photographs and documents spanning decades. Welcome to your mother's real legacy, Fletcher said proudly. On the walls, William saw photographs of Diana meeting with the people now surrounding him. Documents showing financial transactions that traced money from foreign governments into British bank accounts. Recordings of phone conversations that would destroy political careers and bring down governments. But it was the timeline on the far wall that made William understand the full scope of what his mother had been fighting against. It showed decades of suspicious deaths, convenient accidents, and political scandals that had all served to protect the same group of people. Your mother wasn't the first to discover this, Margaret explained, pointing to names and dates going back to the 1960s. But she was the first to survive long enough to gather real evidence. Until they finally got to her, William said bitterly. Actually, Fletcher said, exchanging a glance with Margaret, they didn't. William and Kate stared at him in confusion. What do you mean? She died. We were there. We buried her. You buried someone, Fletcher said gently. But it wasn't your mother. Before William could respond, a door on the far side of the warehouse opened. A woman walked through it, moving slowly but with unmistakable grace. She was older, her blonde hair now silver, her face lined with years of worry and hiding. But her eyes were the same brilliant blue that William remembered from his childhood. Hello, my darling boy, Diana said, her voice breaking with emotion. The world stopped. William felt Kate's hand slip from his as his knees gave way. He was hallucinating. He had to be. The stress, the fear, the impossible revelations of the day had finally broken his mind. But Diana kept walking toward him, kept speaking in the voice he had missed every day for 24 years. I'm so sorry, she said, tears streaming down her face. I'm so sorry I had to let you believe I was dead. I'm sorry I missed your weddings, meeting my grandchildren, being there for all the moments a mother should never miss. William couldn't speak, couldn't move, couldn't think. Kate was beside him, supporting him as his world rearranged itself around this impossible truth. Mummy. The word came out like a sob, like the cry of the 15-year-old boy who had walked behind her coffin, broken and alone. Yes, my love, Diana said, finally, reaching him and pulling him into her arms. I'm here. I'm alive. And I'm never leaving you again. As William held his mother for the first time in over 2 decades, Fletcher quietly explained to Kate what had really happened that night in Paris. The crash was real, he said. But Diana survived. We got to her before the people who had arranged the accident could finish the job. We let the world believe she had died while we kept her hidden, kept her safe, gave her time to finish her investigation. The body at the funeral? Kate asked, her voice numb with shock. A woman who had died in a separate car accident the same night, Margaret said sadly. Someone with no family, no one to mourn her. Diana insisted we give her the funeral of a princess, said it was the least we could do. Diana finally released William, though she kept one hand on his face as if she couldn't quite believe he was real either. I wanted to come back so many times, she said. When you graduated from university, when you joined the military, when you married Kate, when the children were born. But every time I tried, they found me. They're very good at what they do, and they never stopped looking. Then why now? William asked, his voice still hoarse with emotion. Why reveal yourself now? Because Kate's investigation forced their hand, Diana explained. They were going to kill all of you rather than risk exposure. But also because my other child, the baby I had after Paris, is old enough now to help us fight back. Where is he? William asked. Or she? Diana smiled, the same radiant expression that had made her the most beloved woman in the world. Actually, you've already met. Several times, in fact. She gestured toward one of the people who had been waiting in the warehouse, someone William had barely noticed in all the chaos. As the person stepped forward and removed a hat and glasses that had been disguising their features, William gasped in recognition. It was Sam, the young photographer who had been documenting Kate's charity work for months. The person who had gained access to their family through perfectly normal professional channels. The person who had been close enough to their children to photograph them, close enough to their home to know their routines. Hello, brother, Sam said quietly, and William could see Diana's eyes looking back at him from a face that was unmistakably royal. You've been protecting us, Kate realized. All those times you were at our events, you weren't just taking pictures. I was watching for threats, Sam confirmed, making sure the conspiracy hadn't figured out how close Kate was getting to the truth. And when they finally made their move today, I was ready. Diana looked at her 2 adult children, standing together for the first time in their lives. I know this is overwhelming. I know you have questions, and I know you're angry with me for the choices I made. But, right now, we need to focus on stopping the people who have controlled the royal family for too long. Fletcher stepped forward with a tablet computer. We have evidence of everything now. Financial records, recorded conversations, documentary proof of murders made to look like accidents. Enough to bring down the entire conspiracy and restore the monarchy to what it should be. What about our children? William asked, the practical concerns of a father overriding everything else. They're safe, Diana assured him. And once we expose the truth, they'll never have to live in fear the way we have. They'll grow up in a royal family that serves the people, not the other way around. Kate looked around the warehouse, at the evidence of decades of corruption, at the family that had been torn apart by lies and deception. What do we do now? Diana smiled, and for the first time in 24 years, it wasn't shadowed by fear or sadness. Now we take back what was stolen from us. We tell the world the truth, and we make sure that no one ever again has to sacrifice their life to protect the crown. As the sun set over London, the real royal family began to plan their return from the shadows. The conspiracy that had controlled them for so long was about to face an enemy it had thought dead and buried. Diana Spencer was alive, and she was ready to finish what she had started all those years ago. William looked at his mother, his wife, and his newly discovered brother, surrounded by the evidence that would change British history forever. The door he had opened that morning had led him through the darkest truths imaginable, but it had also led him home. Tomorrow, the world would learn that sometimes the greatest fairy tales are the ones that are actually true.